My friend Brian Sams and my producer Luke Clayton host a podcast entitled the Church Advance Podcast. I highly recommend that you check them out and benefit from their ministry to church leaders and the church at large. Again, that's the Church Advance Podcast, hosted by Brian Sams and Luke Clayton. I hope you'll give them a listen. This is the On Preaching Podcast with H.B. Charles Jr., the podcast dedicated to helping you preach faithfully, clearly, and better. Good day, friends. I want to start this episode of the podcast by inviting you to the Cutting It Straight Expository Preaching Conference that will take place September 23rd through the 25th here in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Shiloh Metropolitan Baptist Church, where I am privileged to serve as pastor teacher. I am grateful and thankful for this opportunity the conference provides us to train, model, and promote faithful biblical preaching and teaching. This is an encouraging event that will feature, first of all, models of Bible exposition. We're grateful for the guests that will be with us to speak. Likewise, there will be lectures on the principles of exposition and hands-on workshops to help you flesh out the process of sermon preparation and sermon delivery. We're grateful and thankful for the Cutting It Straight conference and the contribution it has made to not just senior pastors, but associate ministers, Bible teachers, etc. We believe everybody should cut it straight. You can register for Cutting It Straight 2025 at cutstraight.org or hbcharlesjr.com. I hope you'll join us September 23rd through 25th for Cutting It Straight. In this episode of the podcast, I want to talk about time management for busy preachers. Okay. I'm going to confess up front that I am probably not the person who should be having this conversation. If you were to bump into me at some random place and ask me, how can I be praying for you? I would my general response is to ask people to pray Psalm 90, verse 12 for me. So teach us to number our days, praise Moses, so that we may get a heart of wisdom. I feel more than any other matter in my life, I feel the burden of the time. And I'm at an age and season of life and ministry where I recognize that everything I say yes to, I'm saying no to something else. And a lot of activities, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of opportunities. And I'm in the third quarter of life. I want to use my time well. And I feel the burden of that. So I always feel like my task list is longer than the time I have to go at it. I also feel that the older I get, I am at this now as a pastor for more than 30 years, but it takes me longer now to prepare sermons. I am more thoughtful about the text, more prayerful in my time of study, and thinking more about application to the congregation that I serve. And so there are things I do to slow me down so that I'm not just rushing to an outline to have to preach on Sunday. So all of that is just a confession. Come to Jesus. Come to Jesus. This is the On Preaching Podcast, starting out with an altar call. And I am up front that I am not an expert on time management, but there are fundamental things that help me get done what I need to get done. A couple of principles that I try to practice. And so when I want to share some of them with you. When I talk about time management for busy preachers, I'm talking about managing your time well for sermon preparation. And that's not the only thing that you have to do as a pastor. There are other responsibilities you will inevitably have, and you have to balance sermon preparation along with the other things that you are required to do in ministry. That doesn't include, just personal stuff and family stuff that are also high priorities for every single one of us. How do you make sure you steward well whatever time you have for sermon preparation? Maybe is the question that I want to answer in this podcast. And let me offer you a couple of principles to practice. Number one, plan ahead. Plan ahead. Every preacher should have a plan for planning your preaching. I want you to hear that carefully. You should not just plan your preaching. Indeed, do that. But you need to have a plan for planning your preaching. You need to have some kind of system in place where you are thinking ahead about what you are going to work on so that you are always ahead of yourself. And at the time you have to prepare, you are actually using that time in preparation, not figuring out what you will prepare. I know what it's like to be a young pastor, and Sunday's coming. In my first church that I served as a young man, there were 2 Sunday morning services. And I inherited a tradition from my predecessor, who was also my father, that he preached for his entire ministry 2 different messages in those Sunday morning services. At a certain point, I was able to change that expectation so that the church came to expect that there would be one message. But I know what it's like to be a young guy and you have the responsibilities on you. And sometimes you have several messages to preach or teach that week. And you sit down and open up your Bible. And what am I going to say? And if you're not careful, you can eat into the time that you have to prepare, trying to figure out what you're going to prepare. So it just helps me that after Sunday, I already know what text I'm working on for next Sunday. If the Lord changes the plan, so be it. At this stage, I'm fine. If the Lord changes the plan, I'm going to follow the Lord. But that possibility, I won't use as an excuse for not planning. You need to plan ahead. I think for a lot of guys, that'll be, on the old G.I. Joe cartoons I used to watch as a kid, they would end with some PSA and would end by saying, and knowing is half the battle. I just think knowing this is half the battle for a lot of guys. You got to have some process of planning your preaching or you are ahead of yourself. Secondly, you need to know yourself. You need to know yourself. I'm going to use King James language here. Know thyself. By that, I mean, you need to know, are you a morning person or an evening person? You need to know, when are you more focused and when are you less attentive? You need to know when are you the strongest? When are you the weakest? You need to know about yourself, and you need to build your study time around those times when you are at your best. So, I mean, if you're picking a time to prepare and you're not focused, you know what it is to get down at it and be working, and you finish and you can't concentrate. and you get to the other side of the work you did, and it's not in you. You feel like you are struggling to make sense of what you're studying. It is a battle to get get your thoughts in order. Um, you need to know yourself, and as best you can, or to the degree that you are able, you need to build a schedule of preparation around the time where you are at your best. The best time to study is when you are at your best. I will say that again. The best time to study is when you are at your best. And to some degree, that is a schedule issue. I'll get to that next. But that begins with you just knowing yourself and building around that knowledge. Number 3, schedule everything. There is a sense in which what does not get scheduled does not get done. And there are other things that you have scheduled. You may have, family dinner and or family devotional time scheduled, and you know that there's a place you're supposed to be at a certain time. You may have staff meetings, leadership meetings, elders meetings that you have to be in, and you know that you have to be at a certain place at a certain time for a certain reason. There are, I don't know, doctor's appointments. There are haircut appointments, whatever. On this day, you got to cut the grass. There are things that are on your schedule. There are sick visitations. There are funerals. There are counseling sessions that are on your schedule. Let me just ask, why is not your sermon preparation time on your schedule? It's not good. It's not wise. It's not right to just leave your preparation time at the whim of your schedule, where you're like, whenever I can get it in is when I will get it in. No, friend, you need to schedule that time. There was a season in my ministry where I don't really feel like I had a quote unquote normal week. I know people talk about starting with your ideal week and building out from there. There was just whatever that would have looked like. It wasn't happening in that season of my ministry. I was a younger man. I had a younger family. A lot of things that were going on. So a part of my weekend was at least to schedule the next week. So I knew I had, this funeral, that meeting, that family matter. And I would, preparing for the next week, schedule, hey, these are the hours I'm studying. And those hours may look different from week to week. These are the hours I'm in the office next week. These are the hours I am blocking out for study. These are the hours you can schedule anything you want to meet with anyone that you want to schedule. But you've got to have some kind of schedule. Typically, for most people, what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done. Or, what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done well. So my third piece of advice would be to you, schedule everything. Fourthly, start early. Start early. There's a sense in which I work good under pressure. And as the week progresses, when it gets toward, I would say, Wednesday, my focus shifts to Sunday. And it is also when I get bigger chunks of time to be working. But anything can happen. We live in a world of interruptions. And what saves my bacon so often is that I did not wait till the end of the week to get started. I started early, and it's in my schedule. I am ramping up how much I do over the course of the days, but I want to touch my text every day that week. And I mean, for instance, on a Monday, it may be nothing more than me just reading the passage devotionally. But I want to touch my text every day. And I want that process to increase along the week in terms of how much time I am allotting. But it is by starting earlier that I am able to not be panicked or totally thrown off track by fluxes in my schedule or interruptions in my time or changes in what I planned. And so I would encourage you, start early in the morning, start early in the week. And the more you eat up those that early time to get you going, it gives you some flexibility and you're not working under pressure. I think there is a degree to which when you are working under pressure, it can rob you of focus. It can rob you of creativity. It can rob you of, frankly, resources that might help you. There's some idea you need to chase down. There's an illustration that you may want to look up. And I think if you've been preaching for a while, you just know what it is to feel like I needed an illustration there, or I needed to think that part through a little clearly. I just did not have time. I think starting earlier in the week and earlier in the day will aid you in that process. Number 5, practice discipline. Practice discipline. So I used to read, there was a Moody magazine, and I used to read Moody magazine, and early, there was a promotion for the upcoming MacArthur Study Bible. So figure out how long that study Bible has been out. There was an ad in that study Bible for that study Bible, and I never will forget it. It said basically that some young preacher asked MacArthur what makes a great preacher, in essence. And the young man was surprised by MacArthur's answer. He said that the difference between the average preacher and the good preacher is that good preachers stay in their seats until the hard work is done. What a line. I think this is an irrefutable truth. The difference between a lot of average preachers and good preachers is that good preachers tend to stay in the seat until the hard work is done. So I want to encourage you to just practice discipline. It just means, I said schedule that time, but you know what it is to have the time that you have scheduled. So that means no one else is bothering you, but something rises up in you. Now you should respond to the emails that you have. Oh yeah, now you should write that letter you forgot to write. You need to sit down, focus, and get started. But another thing about practicing discipline, don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for inspiration. You just got to sit down and get to work and let inspiration catch up with you. It's almost like exercise. If you want to get in shape, you're going to have to exercise. And if you wait till you feel like exercising, it's never going to happen. You can be at a place where you never feel like exercising, but you feel good after you did it. Right. And there are things that are important in life that you can't wait for your feelings to catch up. You just gotta get down in the seat and get to work and trust that the inspiration will come somewhere along the line. Tied to practicing discipline, I want to say you got to avoid distractions. I mentioned like one of them, you don't want to be caught up in the tyranny of the urgent. There are some things that are important. There are some things that are urgent. There are some things that are urgent and important. Urgent may be that email that you saw. Important is sermon preparation for Sunday. urgent and important, the building's on fire. There'll be very, very few things that are urgent and important. Generally, we live our lives dealing with the urgent and with the important. And in a lot of times, emails and meetings and activities are urgently crying out for your attention. And the important work of sermon preparation doesn't even bother you. It doesn't mention, hey, Sunday's coming. You might want to spend some time with me, right? It doesn't, it doesn't say a word until Saturday night, and you really, really feel. That's when sermon preparation becomes both urgent and important, because you got to preach in a few hours. It's not a good place to live. So one of the things you need to do is just, I saw a meme this week that simply said, you don't need more time, you need more focus. And I know that's true of me. I'm careful about saying what I don't have time for. There are a lot of things that we waste time on. TV, social media, internet. You can fall in the rabbit holes, looking up something on the internet or on social media. You need to avoid distractions. You need to silence, turn off, quiet whatever is going to rob you of your focus, so that you can spend your time concentrating in what one author calls deep work. Deep work gets into effectiveness. So avoid distraction. Seek wisdom. I think this helps in, I think one reason you read commentaries is that you want to glean from the wisdom of others. There are guys who have spent decades. I think there are guys who have spent more time writing the commentary, more years writing the commentary on Ephesians than you will spend preaching through the book of Ephesians. I want you to think about that. That there are men who it took them more time to write that book on the Gospel of John than it will take you to preach the Gospel of John. They have dedicated themselves to that book, and years, if not decades, of study and labor, and you're able to glean from them. Take advantage of that. Find out who's preached through what you have in front of you, what you're working on. This is where you need a band of brothers to encourage you along the way in your preaching. Yeah, so I would just say you need to find whatever way you can seek wisdom. From books, from friends, from mentors, whatever resources are available to you. Get the wisdom of others. In the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom. And I think that helps you use your time more effectively when you get into, I think a simple question, if you're starting a book of the Bible, is to ask somebody, who did you find helpful on this? And if you've got serious friends who will be honest with you, they'll tell you, hey, that guy, I leaned on him. That guy wasn't worth it. And if those are guys you trust, take advantage of their wisdom and use it in your sermon preparation to manage or steward your time well. Be strategic. And by be strategic, I mean Ecclesiastes 10:10. If the axe is dull, more work is required, but skill will bring success. So you want to work smarter, not harder. And that usually requires you having some kind of system. I have a system of study. I have a process. And sometimes the message comes to me early in the process. Sometimes it comes very late in the process. But even when it comes late, I'm not panicking, because I have a system and a process that I go through week in and week out. And I know I've just had the Lord meet me somewhere along the way, so many times, week in and week out, that I trust the process. I trust the process. Coach Jackson, back in the day, quoted he coached the Bulls. He coached the Lakers. And one of the things that fascinated me is if his team was up 30, you see basketball coaches running up and down the court, yelling instructions, but he would just be sitting there like he's one of the movie stars in the Forum back in the day, or Staples Center. He would just be sitting there. And if his team was up 30 or down 30, he would just be sitting there. He wouldn't call timeout. And someone asked him about that. And he's like, if I call a timeout, I'm only going to tell them, what we practiced. Just stick with the system. And there's a sense in which I've really tried to factor that into my study. You want to have a system. That system should involve reading, recording, and reflecting on the text that you are studying. And whatever that process is for you, from text to sermon, you need to establish that process, and over time be refining that process and be working on it so that you know what you got to do. Not only do I know, I don't know how long it takes me to produce a sermon, but I know what my process is. And I know what days I need to be at this point by this day. And I'm able to kind of put my foot on the gas or off the gas if I'm not where I need to be on certain days. But that's because I have a system that I have stuck to and that works. And I want to encourage you to be strategic. Find a system, adopt that system, adapt it for your personal process, be refining it over time, and stick with it. The last thing I'll mention here is to reject perfectionism. Reject perfectionism. And I think a lot of procrastination can be rooted to the spirit of perfectionism, which can induce fear that hinders you from getting going. In the tech world, they have a slogan, ABS. And that means always be shipping. So there are tech companies, their concern is to get it out. You can make it better later, but you need to get it out. And I even think like the Apple phone company people, they make big announcements every year. And at this stage, there's like, yeah, but we won't get to that till 2 years from now, or it won't be till next year. But we'll get this out now. We'll get that out later. And they get it out, and then they start sending out updates, making it better. So I really think you should follow that practice. Don't be paralyzed by a fearful sense of anxiety that would have you think it's got to be perfect. On Sunday morning, there are some selected Sundays where, sure, buddy, swing for the fence. But most of the time, you should not be trying to swing for the fence. You should just be trying to get on base. And the next week, you should just try to get on base, even if that means you got to, lean into a pitch some weeks and take one for the team. Get another, God willing, chance at the plate next week. Don't try to don't be consumed with trying to preach the perfect sermon or the greatest sermon. Ralph Douglas West. I was struggling in a season of my preaching some years ago, and Ralph said, well, one of the things, HB, you need to do is that you need to stop trying to prove to your people you can preach. They know if you can preach or not at this point. You just need to feed them and stop worrying about whether or not they think you're a good preacher. I want to say that to you. I may not know you, But let go of the fear of trying to prove you're a good preacher. Just feed your family well and trust God to do the rest. May the Lord help each of us to live out Psalm 90, verse 12. Lord, teach us as preachers of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Thanks for listening. I'd love any input, feedback, ideas you may have about principles to practice to use your time wisely in sermon preparation. You can reach me at hbcharlesjr.com. You can also find me on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram. My handle is HB Charles Jr. in all of those places. Likewise, you can find the show notes and other episodes of this podcast at hbcharlesjr.com, and whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, you'll find us there. If you're listening to this podcast, how about subscribing to the podcast? And as well, if you would like, rate, or comment on the podcast, it'll help others to find this material, and I would consider it a personal favor. Friends, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is also a video element now to this podcast. You can still find us in all of the typical podcast platforms that you are accustomed to, but also the video of this podcast is also available at our YouTube site. You can look it up by searching for Cutting It Straight. Not only will you find episodes of this podcast on our YouTube page, you'll also find messages that I preach from my pulpit here in Jacksonville at the Shiloh.Church, and messages from the Cutting It Straight Expository Preaching Conference and other material that might be a help, blessing, or encouragement. So how about you not only search for this podcast there, but that you subscribe and like that Cutting It Straight page so that others will find it and that we'll be able to be a blessing and benefit to others through this ministry. Thanks in advance. I'm really excited that the second issue of the new Cutting It Straight magazine is now available. The emphasis of this particular issue is on pastoral preaching, and there are solid contributions by faithful men, as well as tools to help you in your own sermon preparation. This is a new step of faith that we are taking to serve pastors, preachers, and teachers to help you in your handling of the word and your proclamation of the truth. Let me invite you to subscribe to the new Cutting It Straight magazine. You can do so at cismag.org. Again, that's cismag.org. I hope that you'll subscribe and tell a friend. Thanks in advance for your partnership in the gospel. You've been listening to the On Preaching Podcast. For more information or resources, or to contact me, go to www.hbcharlesjr.com.